I almost feel guilty for doing this, but it's a momentary feeling and it'll pass. This is the Last Pick Show with Rahim Khan, and I am reviewing Avatar Aang, The Last Airbender. Yes, that's right. Avatar Aang, The Last Airbender, which is a movie that technically should not be out, um, is out, and I won't say how I saw it. I'm sure you guys already know. I'm sure there are many of you out there who've seen the movie, but it's a crying shame that a movie this good is now is in technical limbo. Okay, first a little context, then of course the review. Context is, of course, that we all knew, following, of course, the conclusion of Korra, that there were plans afoot for more sort of like delving into the Avatar mythos, and we know that there's going to be a what's it called, a new series, Avatar Seven Havens, with a new Avatar, and there were going to be more. There was going to be a theatrical release. There was going to be a feature-length movie with Team Avatar, Avatar Aang and the Gang, and that eventually would become Avatar Aang: The Last Airbender, and that was slated for release October 26th. October 2026, October later this year. Forget the date. But then, and I guess this is going to go down in the history of Hollywood as one of those major fuck ups. Somebody at Paramount, the studio responsible for this movie, apparently emailed the movie to a Twitter. I don't know if this person, I'm not sure who this person is. If they're like sort of like a critic or something like that. I have no idea, right? I couldn't be bothered. I didn't even bother sort of digging into that. But guy, this person, I don't even know if it's a guy or a girl, whatever. But this person turned out to be a real piece of shit because, and of course you guys might be saying that, hey, you've done pretty much the same thing, but wait, I'll clarify. But this guy turned out to, like, he had the entire movie and put out screen grabs, or no, in fact, put out clips of the movie onto Twitter. And according to, if he was saying, just put it out to, according to him, it's not verbatim, but he said, I just put it out to troll it a little bit. I don't know, troll the movie, troll people, I don't know. But I mean, sort of, with social media culture being the way that it is, I'm sure, I mean, sort of for instant gratification and virality, putting something like that on your Twitter would immediately bump you up. The algorithm always loves a scandal. So that happened. But then shortly thereafter, the entire movie was leaked, right? I very, very frankly, like, for example, I remember reading, of course, that initial thing which happened like last week, where they said that clips are out. And I was like, no way in hell am I going to watch that, because you know what? I am keen on watching this movie in the cinema. Of course, it's the first time that we're going to actually watch Avatar on the big screen. So, of course, I was excited. But then, now this is a weird decision. I'm not saying Paramount forced my hand, but I am referring to that limbo that I was talking about, that sort of in between space. In that now Paramount, because the movie's out there online. I'm not sure of the numbers, but I'm sure a lot of people have already watched, downloaded, disseminated the movie. So Paramount's damage control is if it's to be believed, because we already know that they've launched an investigation, blah, 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 blah. But if it's to be believed, they're actually pulling it from their, schedule, and will release it on their streaming platform at some point. Now, before I share how I feel about it, we can turn to the animators, the director, Lauren Montgomery, a lot of people who worked on the movie itself, who've come out and said that, and of course, Who would want to see something that they've poured their heart and soul and their time into to be undone in such a fashion? Because, while streaming numbers are, I mean, sort of like, they're definitely, they can be encouraging, and, they can prompt, um, what's it called, sequels, or, sort of more things. But, studios always like to see a good theatrical run first. And, you know, seeing as how I mean, how I cherish this, having grown up watching the original run of this show, and then how scores of people rediscovered it during COVID. I mean, I think a sizable number, and then of course there was the Netflix adaptation, the live action one. I think a fair number of people would have turned out to watch this movie in the cinema, and that would have meant bank for Paramount. Now, of course, this has happened, and studios are, well, they're studios. It's always the bottom line for them. So now they're wondering if perhaps the best possible course here is to just release it online. Uh, I don't think so. Um, for a movie that was clearly made for the big screen, it was made for cinema. I think that it would be a disservice to a movie that, while not the best that Avatar can offer, is most definitely a great step in the right direction to take this franchise. Okay, so now we can start with the review part of this, because yeah, I get it. Um, some of you may say, you're no better than the people who leaked it, and then you shouldn't be watching it, you shouldn't be download what's it called, any of that stuff. But I'm hoping through this review it will at least encourage those of you who, okay, you may well, as when you may not want to wait for the theatrical release. However, if there is one, I 100% am going to be there. I think this movie deserves it. And again, I really want to see what I saw on my humble, what, I don't even know what's it called, the inches of my thing, but on my humble, what's it called, screen. I definitely want to see this, sort of blown up to size. So yeah, um, I really hope they do not cave in right now. I understand where they're coming from, because here we are in April. There's still, what, almost 6 months to October. So by that time, more and more people may have seen it, but that doesn't mean that we do not want to rewatch it in the cinema. And then again, there's a lot of people who will not have access to this movie, I mean, depending on where you are in the world. So, yeah, I mean, it's a shame. It's a shame this has happened, but I don't know. I mean, some heads need to roll. Now, of course, the movie itself. Uh, it doesn't quite hit the highs that Avatar the series did. I don't think ever any, I think maybe in time, maybe what's it called, they'll be able to put out something that does hit the glory, that was the animated series. This is still a really, really solid effort, and something that is, I think, head and shoulders above the live action that Netflix put out. Not to say that that's like sort of a barometer, or sort of a yardstick for Avatar shows, but I mean, this is a really, really good, what's it called, feature length for Avatar, and I most definitely want to see more. It's so good, so good. To see Team Avatar again. It's like sort of uh, meeting old friends again. And I remember, I think this was, I'm not sure if this was with the release of like the last season of Korra, or maybe around season 2 of Korra. But what's it called? They put out, Nickelodeon put out, like, this still of um, Team Avatar aged. Like, for example, they had now, I think they were all like young adults, right? And honestly, I remember even back then it brought like a tear, a single tear to my eyes because, it's good seeing these beloved, beloved, cherished characters that again, I think I have so much tied to, and then seeing them like, just grown up like that. It was very gratifying. I really appreciate that they did that. And it's equally good to see this happen with what's it called, this movie. Because here we are. This is many years now into the future. They're all sort of young adults. Republic City has been established. Spoiler, Uncle Iroh's not around. There's no mention of him, so one can assume he has passed on. Um, Ang is still, he still has the trauma of being the lone survivor of his people, the air nomads. That still weighs upon him, and that is the central thrust of this movie. Um, it starts off with him. I think this is, yeah. He's at the Southern Air Temple, and he's attacked by this rebel band who are known as the Denied. They are non-benders who feel that they've been shortchanged by not being, you know, given the gift of bending. I would feel the same, and they are seeking a what's it called? This lost avatar, Avatar Sonam. Um, Interesting choice of name, and and sort of why? Because the thing is that if you remember in the series, how predominantly, I mean, the racial mix in what's it called, the Avatar world was predominantly Asian, with of course um, native peoples as well. There wasn't any brown people, so to speak. There was, of course, that one guru, the one who tells him all about his chakras, right? And of course, one could assume that that guy was from the subcontinent, like Indian, whatever. But with the announcement of what's it called, the new avatar, I'm forgetting her name, but the new avatar for Avatar Seven Havens, who is clearly a brown avatar, we now see Avatar leaning into that a little more because Avatar Sonam, voiced by Frida Pinto, is clearly a brown avatar. And this lost avatar has, I mean, Aang taps into his past lives, to see if anyone knows anything about her. Nobody does. But he does find a sort of a hint or a clue as to her possible whereabouts. And it's in this sort of impossible sort of mountain that is beyond, like, sort of towers above the clouds. And in it, he finds a lone individual, similarly encapsulated in the ice, like he was all those that century ago. Turns out it is Dave Bautista's character, Taga, who is also an airbender, but an airbender, I think, almost 5,000 years old. That sets off this entire um, quest, if you will, across um, the world, where they have to find a staff. The staff apparently has the ability, much like Aang with his energy bending, to tap into the spirit world to grant people the power of bending, specifically in this case, air bending. Because we learn, and again, there's a lot of spoilers in this, so you may want to avoid. But apparently, it is learned because, by Korra's time, 10,000 years have passed. So, I mean, sort of this avatar was around, this avatar Sonam existed around, sort of the 5,000 mark. And at the time, the Earthbenders were a peacekeeping force, something that you see happen in season three. Yeah, with Kuvira and all of those, where the the airbenders, the air nomads are deployed almost as a peacekeeping force. So in sort of antiquity, we find that the avatars are that the airbenders are being used um, sort of like to create balance between the warring water, earth, and what's it called, Fire Nation. All of these things. Uh okay, cool. I won't delve in more into that because again, I don't want to give too much away. Hopefully, you guys get to watch this movie on your own. Um, let's talk about the good. Good in this is that I'm so glad that the animation in this, the really takes into consideration the format this movie was supposed to be released on, which is the screen, because you have some fantastic, like, big scale, you know, set pieces, fights, sort of a lot of these things that would have looked really good on screen. Um, it's really good to see them exploring, and because I mean, we end the Avatar series, what's it called, The Last Airbender, when Aang is a tender 12 years old, and then we get to hear about him when he's passed on in Korra, almost 75 years later. Um, so there's a lot to explore in between. And the story really fits into place because, sure, there's no mention of it in core or anything like that, but that's okay. I mean, I think that sort of they have this potential gold mine on their hands where they can sort of keep on, you know, hopping in every decade or so of Aang's life to see what other sort of adventures he gets up to. Yes, the story's a little predictable. I mean, from the get-go, you just know that this Aga guy, he's no good. He's no good. He's definitely going to cause divisions in Team Avatar, number one. And you kind of know the trajectory of this story. You know where it's going to go and sort of all of that stuff. So there is that. Um, there is okay. I'll talk about that scene at the end. Maybe you guys may not want to wait until that because again, there's some spoilers. I'm not going to say it's the bad, but I feel that these are some shortcomings of the movie, and the shortcoming of it is that number one, I feel that Avatar is relegated to like the second fiddle uh, positions, which I don't like because that's not how the show dealt with them. Yes, this is an Aang centric story. It is driven by Aang's quest to rebuild the Air Nation, right? But that doesn't mean that after, like, having waited more than like maybe 2 decades to see Zuko, Katara, Sokka, and what's it called, Toph. Just to see them only there for very frankly like one-liners that play to their sort of character idiosyncrasies, like it's just like sort of archetypes of who these guys are. So they're just there to deliver those lines. I didn't like that. And you know, the only person who significantly plays a role in this, which you'd expect because, he is Aang's wife, is Katara. Everyone else are just like, honestly, background characters. I didn't like that about this movie. I thought that they could have done a much better job because one thing, like, for example, I never liked Korra herself. I loved Team Korra, and all of them had their moments to shine. Um, sure, we get some pretty decent bending from all of them, you know. Um, and Sokka still has fantastic moment at the end. And this isn't as much of a spoiler, but Aang having done whatever he's done, he's sort of free falling in the air. Tara sort of jumps to sort of air hug him, which is pretty cool. And they're having this moment, and sort of on screen you have Sokka pop up. Sokka. That's sucker for you. So fantastic. That's one thing I didn't like. Second thing I didn't like was that you know how first, you know, Ang set this sort of bar for like, fantastic on screen, like the choreography, the fight scenes were fantastic, right? The bending and all of that stuff. It set that bar. And then Korra went even further, you know? I mean, Korra had some fantastic fight scenes. I'm still thinking of what's it called? Lin Beifong versus thing. What's it called? The Beifongs versus Kuvira. You can't get any better than that. This movie, unfortunately, even though it has like Studio Mir and all of those people who worked on, Korra and all of that stuff, I think, again, I'm not saying that the bending isn't great in this, but like, I was expecting more. I was expecting more. There's some fantastic, like, there's this one thing that he has. It's like this sort of air pistol type thing that he does. Paga. That's crazy. Um, yeah, I didn't like that. I wanted more from the bending. I'm glad that they get to explore the world a lot more because now, the last time they went across the seas, you know, was to find those ancient fire benders, right? This time they go even further to this place where there are these infinite storms. And the infinite storms, much like sort of in King Kong and Skull Island and all of that stuff, they are sort of this barrier for this place of, what's it called? Sort of a nexus for spiritual energy. And that turns out to be a graveyard for lion turtles. It's kind of heartbreaking, but it's beautiful. Lovely to see. Um, right. It's interesting. And I've always wondered about this. Is that, air nomads are almost presented like sort of Buddhist type, almost, Buddhist Zen type, where they're sort of pacifists. They do not wage wars. They're not that kind. But I always wondered that sort of in their long history, in the tens of thousands of years that have existed, there had to be a bad apple or two. The here is not an example of that because, he was a bad apple before he became an airbender and a great one at that. But it's good to see them also follow, sort of explore that because that's what Taga is. Again, really, really strong visuals, really strong visuals. What else? What else? Okay, can I talk about that one scene? It's a fantastic scene. And it's a scene that, again, made me kind of choke. And this is a scene where, again, it establishes Aang as the avatar for me over Korra any day. There he is in his sort of moment where he could just completely let loose. And yet, he sees this flag, which has the airbending symbols on it, kind of flutter in the wind. And that is this moment. It reminds me of this moment from Supernatural. It's when, what's it called? Sam, when he's, what's it called? Lucifer, and he's beating Doom to death. But then, sort of in the reflection of the Chevy, he sees himself and is reminded of, like, him and his brother's bonds and ties, and that kind of stays his hand. And that's exactly what happens here, because that moment of that flag, seeing it reminds Aang of who he is. And again, this is almost a triumphant moment, equal to him not taking the life of Fire Lord Ozai. And confirmation enough of that comes when later on at the end of the movie, Aang is communing with Avatar Sonam, and she says that it's sort of, you embody the very best of what it means to be an avatar, but also be an air nomad. Being of that beautiful scene, and yeah, definitely made me weep. So I hope that this review is encouragement enough for for you guys to watch this movie if it is released in the cinema, because I am most definitely going to be there, and I really hope that sort of sanity prevails and Paramount does release this movie in the cinema, because it's going to be a shame. The movie deserves to be seen on the big screen, and I really hope that happens.